President Obama urges the U.S. Congress to move quickly to boost the economy, reform immigration laws, and to work with him to reduce gun violence.
Mr. Obama laid out his expansive agenda in his annual State of the Union address. The speech, aired around the world, focused most on domestic matters, but he did make time to address global conflicts. Our coverage begins with VOA's Carolyn Presutti.
In his annual address to the nation, the president focused on what voters say is important to them: guns, jobs, and war.
After a decade of grinding war, our brave men and women in uniform are coming home.
The president says 34,000 troops, about half the force now in Afghanistan, will be home by this time next year. This puts the U.S. on track to completely pull out of Afghanistan in about 2 years, the president said, while continuing to help the Afghan government train and equip its own forces. Some Republicans say the drawdown is taking too long. Representative Paul Brown from Georgia.
I think we ought to get out of Afghanistan as soon as we possibly can. We're spending money there that we don't have, and it's the wrong policy, frankly.
On jobs, Mr. Obama said American business created 6 million more, while consumers are spending again.
It is our generation's task, then, to reignite the true engine of America's economic growth, a rising, thriving middle class.
Every year, members of Congress fill the floor of the chamber. Invited guests usually line the balconies. A number of them this year whose lives have been touched by gun violence. Those who sympathize wore ribbons, while the president insisted that victims expect Congress to act on gun reforms.
They deserve a vote. They deserve a vote.
Experts say presidents often rewrite the speech almost up to the moment of delivery. This year there was a late change after North Korea tested a nuclear weapon the day before.
Provocations of the sort we saw last night will only further isolate them.
On immigration, the president drew applause from both political parties. He called for a legal path to citizenship for the country's 11 million undocumented immigrants.
A path that includes passing a background check, paying taxes and a meaningful penalty, learning English, and going to the back of the line behind the folks trying to come here legally.
For the first time, the Republican response to the president's speech was given in English and Spanish. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida said immigration reform should begin with enforcement.
We must follow through on the broken promises of the past to secure our borders and enforce our laws.
The president plans to capitalize on his speech in 2 immediate ways. He will meet with a bipartisan congressional committee on immigration, and Wednesday he leaves for North Carolina to promote manufacturing jobs. In Washington, Carolyn Presutti, VOA News.
Well, as President Obama ends old conflicts, new ones are emerging in North Africa and Asia. Joining us now is Jim Arkedis, Director of the National Security Project at the Progressive Policy Institute. Welcome, Jim, and I murdered your name.
That's quite all right. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, now the president talked about the willingness of the U.S. to help the allies abroad fight the threat of Al-Qaeda, but he said very clearly that there's no interest in sending thousands of American troops abroad or even occupying other countries. What is the message that the president is sending to the allies abroad?
Well, he's trying to send 2 messages. First, he's trying to send messages to our allies in the fight against terrorism that we will be there and that we will provide support. That's a difficult message to send abroad when, in the domestic context, you always have to consider American politics. And the American public these days is very wary of the idea of yet another war and yet another massive investment of lives and money in countries abroad. They're very tired of the Iraqs and the Afghanistan. So the president wants to be supportive. He's an internationalist president inherently in his heart. He's a little bit restrained by the domestic politics, but he wants to send messages to our allies that we will be there and that we have aligned interests in fighting terrorism.
So there's a kind of war fatigue, but also there's the reality at home, even in terms of monetary.
Sure. Every congressman or senator who maybe in their heart wants to help other countries and wants to be an internationalist always has to consider what's going on in their state or their district so they can object on monetary grounds. They can say, well, gosh, that's a great idea, but we don't really want to spend that money.
Exactly. But the president did actually mention the U.S. role in Yemen, in Libya, in Somalia, and the help it has been giving to the French in Mali. The question is, what are some of the consistent elements in all these scenarios that you could say perhaps actually define the president's approach to conflict abroad?
Well, first of all, the most important thing is that he is an internationalist president and that he wants to help. That's the defining principle of American foreign policy under the Obama presidency, that the United States will remain engaged in the international community, and robustly so. The second idea is that we are here to provide logistical support. We may not be able to send troops. Every situation is different. In certain situations, we may not want to send troops. In certain situations, maybe we do. But no matter what happens, the United States will be there to provide usually logistical support, support in international institutions, in terms of declarations and things like that.
Yes. One other issue that was raised that would be of great interest to Africans, is, particularly those who live here, is the immigration reform.
Sure.
Now, do you see the Congress coming together on this issue soon enough?
Yes, hopefully within the next few months. I mean, what happened in the election this past year is that Republicans got killed. They were slaughtered. Partially because they alienated such a large percentage of the American Latino vote. Over 70% voted for President Obama, 70% of American Latinos. That sent a strong signal to the Republicans in Congress that, hey, we have to get serious on immigration. There will probably be some sort of a comprehensive bill that includes a pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrants who are currently in the country. How that final bill works out and the time frame in which it is actually signed is still up in the air, but I'm quite confident that we'll be able to do something.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.